Hi, and welcome to my first video on my best chess games. The first game I want to show you is a game that I played, Luís Romano, against one of my teammates, Carlos Marco Pereira. This was played at district level in Braga, which is a city in the north of Portugal, and my opponent was rated like 200 points below me. This was the last round, and I definitely had to win if I wanted to have a chance to win the tournament. So I was playing black, and my opponent opened with g4, and I played a Nimzo-indian. I really like it because it's really simple and you don't have to know a lot of theory. Queen c2, all very standard, and now my opponent took with a pawn. I think it's not very logical, because when you put a queen on c2, you want to recapture with a queen, so you don't ruin your pawn structure, but okay. He wanted to have this nice center, and was probably thinking about taking on d5 to get rid of the double pawns, and I just played b6, which I think it's a very logical move. My bishop can come to b7, and after that I can take on c4 and have this nice diagonal for my bishop, or it can play to a6, and in this way I can trade my bad light squared bishop for my opponent's good light squared bishop. My opponent answered with c takes d5, and now I decided to take with a pawn. I could take with the knight or queen, but I would be giving him the center, and I think white would be very well in that position, so I took with the pawn. I'm opening the e file for my rook, so nice file, and okay, now my bishop is not very well placed on b7, but it can come to a6, and like I said before, trade with this bishop. My opponent played knight f3, and now I really don't want to play bishop a6 because I want to wait until he gets his bishop out, so that way if he wants to take my bishop on a6, he needs to lose a tempo. I played c5, my opponent played bishop e2, which is a very unambitious move, I think, because the bishop was obviously well placed on d3. It's a nice diagonal, and now I would probably go bishop a6, bishop takes, knight takes, queen a4, and now probably knight c7, and my knight is going to e6, okay, but it doesn't do much, so it's kind of a strange piece. But my opponent didn't play like that. He instead put the bishop on e2, and now I could play bishop a6, but I thought that now I should play for more, and so I played queen c7, trying to get advantage of his queen on c2 being unprotected, because I have the positional threat of taking on d4, and now he has to take either with a pawn, this pawn, or with a knight, and that will leave the c4 square and the c3 pawn very weak. For example, if he castles, c takes, e takes, and as you can see, these are really weak. Now, maybe castles was possible. It was definitely better than what he played. Maybe even taking on c5, and he has a lot of weaknesses, and this bishop is really bad, but okay, this pawn is also a slight weakness, you can say, and black is better, but you can try to play it. But my opponent played queen b3, and now he's moving the queen a second time, and again I didn't go for this bishop a6 idea, which now with the queen on a7 will even be, I think, worse, because after queen a4 I have to play either queen b7, which looks a little bit artificial, or knight b8, which is a really bad square for my knight. So instead of bishop a6, I played knight c6. I developed this, and knight e5 is always in the air. My opponent maybe could have castled again, probably better, but he played bishop e2, maybe trying to play c4 later on to get his bishop active. But I immediately played knight a5, threatening the queen, which comes to a2, and now c4. And you can see that black is really in control because this square is weak, the queen is out of play, the bishop is out of play, and all black's pieces will be more active than white's. My opponent now played knight e2, trying to cover b3, so I can play knight b3, which was probably not necessary, but okay, prophylactic maybe. I played now bishop f5. Obviously the bishop won't be well placed on b7 or a6 because of these pawns. It would be hitting a wall, as you usually say, and my opponent again played very badly. He played f3, and after f3 I think I'm completely winning. Probably was already, but now even more, because this pawn is weak and g3 is also a bit weaker, and that is important. And it would be a good move if my opponent could play e4 at some time, but he will never be able to because I'm much more developed and I have too much piece power on e4. So I played rook f8, controlling these two squares, e4 and e3, and he defended the pawn with a king. So I could have played now queen e7 maybe, and he would have to play knight f1, and this rook would also be out of play, like this knight, this queen, and this bishop. But okay, I went for a different idea because white is really tied up anyway, so I just decided to double the rooks on the e-file. My opponent can't do anything, so I can take my time and do whatever I want. He played rook a1, so now if I play rook a e8, he can play bishop e1, and this bishop is defending the b3 square, and so the knight is maybe a little bit more free, but okay, black is obviously much better. But I decided to try h5, which simply just gains some space on the king side. My pawn can go to h4, next move, threatening sometimes to go to h3, or just to take advantage of this weak g3 square. And my opponent answered with h4. Now this is the kind of move you usually play with white to stop the pawn going to h4, stop the black pawn going to h4, but in this case it fails statically, and I just destroyed this position. If you want to pause the video and see how, you can pause it. Okay, I'm gonna show the move what I played, and I already had this idea when I played h5, was rook takes e3. And this works because this g3 square is weak. So now, after king takes e3, I simply played queen g3, and the king has no escape squares. Rook e8 is coming with a check, and although I'm a rook down, I'm gonna recover the material really easily because this queen can't defend the king, this bishop can't defend the king, and my pieces are very well placed. The king is on the open e-file, and I'm already threatening to play knight g4, which is actually checkmate in this position. My opponent tried to play knight takes c4. Get out, and here I blundered. What I played was d takes c4, which is very logical, but what I should have played was knight g4, because after king d2, queen f4, king d1, and knight f2 is checkmate. Unfortunately, I didn't see this continuation because I was seeing another continuation, which went d takes c4, bishop takes c4, I mean rook e8 is coming and you have to do something about it, and now knight takes c4, and after queen takes, rook e8, king d2, queen takes g2, and my opponent needs to give the rook back, because if he just plays the king back to c1 or d1, queen c2 is mate. So he just played rook e2, and I took the rook and the h1 rook. So now I'm a piece up and completely winning. My opponent played for a little bit, c4, I took a pawn, check. I'm just going with the h-pawn to queen it, and after bishop e5 I gave a check and traded queens. And after this, in this position, my opponent resigned. Obviously I'm completely winning, I'm a piece up, and the h-pawn is going to queen. So that was the first game I wanted to show you. I think in this position, this idea of playing h5 to encourage h4 and then play rook takes e3, it's really nice. I really liked it, and during the game I felt really proud of this idea.